because in the West, you have to make it look like you're negotiating, even though you know you can't. And so this is all for public consumption. Bekor says that Abbas and his men have gone over the draft and are not pleased. You get that? Mahmoud Abbas has been offered a Palestinian state, and he says, I'm not happy. He's been offered half of Jerusalem, and he says, I'm not happy. He's been offered the Temple Mount, and he says, I'm not happy. You know why? Because he's only happy that they get everything that they say that they want. No compromise. Huh? No compromise. Teresa said that she heard some news this morning. What kind of news did you hear this morning?
When I signed on this morning to get my email for the weekend, there was a news on my homepage that basically said, hey, look, you're willing to give us this, this, and this, but we want the end of Israel, and we want the end of where you have invaded our lands and everything else. We want it all. And we won't be happy until you are gone.
Next article, ynetnews.com. This is August the 28th. Ehud Olmert and Mahmoud Abbas to form a declaration of principles by November. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas Tuesday revolved around the core issues of the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, Ynet has learned. The two, who met at the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem, discussed some of the more sensitive issues such as the status of Jerusalem and the possible borders of a future Palestinian state. Olmert and Abbas decided to hold at least 2 more meetings before October in an effort to come to an understanding about all the core issues before presenting a declaration of principles to the International Peace Conference scheduled to take place in Washington. Do you see what they're saying? We've been going over it. Is that they are telling us that they're planning on presenting a declaration of principles at the peace conference. Evidence of this is that Israel and the Palestinians also agreed that a professional team, including the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, would be formed to create the Declaration of Principles. You see that? So not only are they planning on presenting a Declaration of Principles, but they're forming a committee to do that. It looks like this peace agreement or this peace conference, the Arabs are demanding it include Israel agreeing to a Palestinian state and an implementation schedule. Which means that if the United States or Israel does not come and offer both, there will be no agreement. Bush won't get an agreement, and Israel won't get an agreement. But the fact that Bush has called the conference and Shimon Peres is optimistic, he knows what's required. I'm interpreting to mean that Israel ultimately has agreed to this principle and a timetable. Next article from WorldNet Daily by Aaron Klein, August the 27th. Hamas and Fatah form a joint terror group. Remember what is being reported? There's moderates and there's extremists. The moderates are Mahmoud Abbas, the extremists is Hamas, and the United States is given money and training the quote-unquote moderates, which is Mahmoud Abbas, so that they can have protection against the extremists. But this article is going to tell us that these moderates who were arming is joining with Hamas to form a terror group against Israel. So are they really against Hamas? Are they really moderates like we're being told? Hamas and members of the so-called military wing of Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, Fatah's organization, have been carrying out joint attacks against Israel and recently formed a new terror group to conduct operations against the Jewish state, top Fatah militants told WorldNet Daily. The information comes as the U.S. recently announced large sums of aid to Fatah and initiated military training programs for West Bank Fatah militias, purportedly to back Abbas's group against Hamas and to isolate Hamas in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Top leaders of the Fatah's Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade terror group told WorldNet Daily their organization the past few weeks carried out a series of joint attacks with Hamas against Israel soldiers operating in the northern West Bank. They said the brigades and Hamas formed a new organization called the Fire Belt to attack Israel, and that this past weekend the new Fire Belt group worked together to lob grenades at Israeli forces operating in the vicinity of the northern West Bank city of Nablus. Abu Nasser, a leader of the brigades in Nablus and a self-declared top commander of the Fire Belt group with Hamas, told WorldNet Daily yesterday Fatah militants are unified with Hamas and that the two would attack Israel together. Fatah and Hamas have had diplomatic problems, but that doesn't mean we're not unified in the battle against Israel, he said. The Fire Belt will carry out many more attacks. We hope this cooperation will bring the two parties, Fatah and Hamas, to respect Palestinian unity and safeguard that unity. Our enemy is not Hamas, it is Israel, said Abu Nasser. Abu Nasser is on a list of 152 brigade members of the Palestinians recently presented to Israel for amnesty consideration as a part of further Israeli gestures to bolster Abbas against Hamas. You see that? Do you think our government knows that Fatah and Hamas are joining together? Yeah, but they still tell us that there's moderates and extremists, and we're for the moderates. And George Bush says that he's fighting a war against terrorism, and he's against the terrorists, and he is creating a terrorist state in the Middle East. And he's supposedly fighting against terrorist entities in the Middle East. Now, the next article, August the 28th. Remember, we just read earlier that Israel has presented to Mahmoud Abbas a declaration of principles to declare a Palestinian state and to give him East Jerusalem. Well, this article says, from Haaretz, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas voiced concern on Monday that much is yet to be agreed on before the upcoming international conference in November. He said the conference would be a waste of time if it stuck to a declaration of principles, which is a phrase used by some Israeli officials to describe what they may offer in answer to demands for a rapid final negotiation of a Palestinian state. Earlier Monday, senior government officials said the framework of discussions between Israel and the Palestinians will be expanded to include the establishment of a negotiating team for each side, which will discuss the agreement of principle to be prepared ahead of the peace summit in November. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and Abbas are to meet Tuesday to further discuss the agreement of principles. Meetings between Olmert and Abbas have so far been private, but the framework will now be expanded in order to reach November with a logical product. What's the diplomatic code word for a logical product? A deal to be signed that the Palestinians can agree to, which means a timetable for implementation. That's a logical product. Because the Palestinians in the Arab world saying an agreement for a state without telling us when it's got to happen is not something we can agree on. Olmert and Abbas are expected to meet again before Rosh Hashanah. Sources in the Palestinian Authority said that in their next meeting, Olmert and Abbas will try to agree on as many issues as possible in order to be able to present their points of contention and agreement to U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice when she comes to the region in mid-September. However, Palestinian sources also said that while progress has been made, Olmert seemed interested only in a declaration of intent, while Abbas wanted to formulate a detailed document that would set out the Israeli position on the main issues. The main development in the talks so far has been Olmert's acceding to the inclusion in the agreement of principles of the core issues, meaning Jerusalem, permanent borders, and refugees, and this represents, surprise, surprise, a reversal of his earlier position that raising these issues might lead to a breakdown in negotiations. The government official explained that Olmert has been persuaded to present the Palestinians with a political horizon, which means a Palestinian state, so that Abbas will not lose the support of the Palestinian masses. Now, we're going to go on to Iran. So what we have seen here in these articles regarding Israel and the peace process is Israel is intending to present